Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I.JOE comics podcast. Now, today we are taking a journey back in time once again to the Disavowed Devil's Due era of G.I.JOE, with a look back at G.I.JOE Reborn from Devil's Due in 2004. But I will be not looking at this issue just all on my lonesome. As always, I will be joined by a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and listeners, and viewers.
Everyone. So, Tim, we're looking at G.I.JOE Reborn from Devil's Due in 2004. You've got your copy in my hand. I've got my physical copy over my shoulder. I did read this one as a single floppy for a change, because often I'll be reading it as either a digital version or as a custom bound version from one of my custom bound G.I.JOE collections. But yes, this one, I thought, I got a bunch of comics just randomly. This one was in a lot, and so yeah, read it in person as a single issue.
But do you have behind you a green bound hardcover with the whole reloaded run? Is that a volume?
That's one of my volumes.
Cool.
Yes. And I think I stuck in the back of that volume actually a connected thing, which was the G.I.JOE Transformers crossover, which we'll probably talk about in passing in a minute.
Yes.
So speaking of a minute, it's been a hot minute since we've been in the Disavowed world. So I'll just remind everyone that the issue we're talking about today is a sequel to Cobra Reborn, which we spoke about a little while ago, a few months ago now. So that's the sequel. It came out the following month. And we also spoke to writer Paul Jenkins, who was the writer of the Cobra issue. Which brings us back to G.I.JOE Reborn. I did have a look at, there's a kind of a blurb in the front of this book. So the blurb said, "A new terror has emerged in the world, a unified legion of radical militias, powerful enemies of the United States, and even internal sympathizers, a terror known as Cobra." What were thought to be random attacks and incidents throughout the country were actually orchestrated by the man called Cobra Commander, disguised and arguably driven mad by the system that taxes the little man and benefits the risk he will launch a full-scale war on our nation in mere hours unless stopped. In G.I.JOE Cobra Reborn, we watched as the commander gathered his forces, but on the other side of the coin, a frantic administration takes split-second decisions to handle the crisis. It must be dealt with quickly, quietly, and efficiently without invoking hysteria. With sympathizers to Cobra in our own ranks, the world needs a task force formed outside of the standard bureaucracy, operating in secrets, unknown to even top military brass. The world needs G.I.JOE, and it needs them now. That's what it said at the front of this book, and boy, was that a concise blurb, or possibly not. But it's been a while since we read this. The last issue, Tim, so Cobra Reborn. So let's have a little quick flick through that and just remind ourselves what on earth was going on. So at the beginning of that issue, there was a break-in of the CDC. So there was some sort of, toxin or whatnot that was stolen. That is sort of brought up again in the issue that we're about to read. And then over the course of the issue, Cobra Commander goes around talking to sort of Cobra people and gathering up allies. So Destro and Baroness. Then we find out about his history. He's exploding up a bridge. He's got Storm Shadow already established as his bodyguard. He's scooping up Major Blood into his tasks, into his team. There's some sort of CIA looking into what's going on. There's a building of, I don't know, bases it. Then he's More recap of his history. He scoops up Zartan and also Firefly. And he's got his legions already established. They tapping into the president's phone, and we are left with a sort of a threat of Cobra and a sort of a sign appearing on all of the monitors, all of these screens across the world. So Cobra very firmly established in the pages of Cobra Reborn there. Tim, you're on mute.
Including that second to last panel. That is the American president sitting on his bed looking at a very strangely shaped television, which has been taken over by the Cobra symbol. So it's not just like sort of Times Square, or is it Piccadilly Circus? Like some famous metropolitan urban plaza with tall buildings and screens that have the Cobra insignia. It's also, in the heart of the White House. And
I guess the issue concludes with a teaser coming soon, February, the following month. G.I. Joe Reborn from John Nay Ryber and Joe Bennett.
So both of these specials are 40 pages. They were both cover price $4.95 when they came out in 2004. And I spent a lot of time in our previous episode talking in the Cobra Reborn episode about what it meant as a comics person and a G.I. Joe fan that Devil's Due was starting this second series and starting a new continuity. And the analogy was Marvel's Ultimate Universe. Don't worry about all these decades of continuity. Here's a new Spider-Man, a new X-Men, a new G.I. Joe that's starting right now in the modern day, like the year 2000, the year 2004. And then as a publishing device and a hook, this new G.I. Joe continuity started with an issue number 1 and an issue number 1 and an issue number 1, right? There's and startlingly, it began with the Cobra special, right? So this first comic is called G.I. Joe Cobra Reborn number 1, and it's 40 pages. And as Mark just described, it introduces Cobra. And then to today's episode, there's this 40-page G.I. Joe Reborn special, which is called G.I. Joe Reborn, not G.I. Joe Reborn, number 1. And then the following month, the actual monthly series began, which was not called Ultimate G.I. Joe or G.I. Joe Ultimate. It was called G.I. Joe Reloaded. And I gotta say, there was, I don't want to say confusion, but this required paying some attention. If you were asking your comic book store to order this stuff for you, I assume if you were at a comic book store doing the ordering, because it's not just issue 1, 2, 3. It's special, and then issue 1, and the subtitles are different. And so you're like, I think a lot of people, you and I just refer to this as the Reloaded continuity, even though the first 80 pages of it, are Reborn. And the other thing that this sort of reminds me of is when comics publishers try and squeeze a 0 issue out before issue number 1 or right after. And sometimes that really does have the origin. I'm a traditionalist and I grew up reading G.I. Joe, and you don't need a 0 issue to have an origin. You can have origins spread out across, issue 21 and 26 and 144. And if it's a team book, there's no one origin anyway. You've got lots of characters, and over time they might have changes anyway. So the publishing device, the gimmick of a 0 issue is fun, but sorry, I think it's dumb. But you know what this kind of reminds me of, actually, having sort of 3 issue number 1s or 3 specials? It reminds me of XO Manowar, the Valiant series in the 90s, where like 2 years in, the series started at issue number 1, and then like a year or 2 in, they did a 0 issue. And then I think they did a 0-0 issue, or I'm getting this mixed up with Ninjak, which had an issue 1 and then an issue 0 and then a double 0. And that's really fun and stupid. And confusing and fun. Please don't do that. At the time, period, slightly new thought. As listeners of this podcast will probably remember, I am not the biggest fan of the Devil's Due run of G.I. Joe comics. I started reading it in 2001 when it began. I didn't stick around. I came back twice to check in, and in neither case did I stick around. And let me tell you, I did show up in 2004 for this new continuity, written mostly by John Reiber and a little bit by Paul Jenkins. I got the Cobra special, I got the G.I. Joe special, I got the main issue number 1, and I stuck around for, I don't remember, 5 or 6 issues. And then, not surprisingly, it wasn't to my taste, and I let it go. Mark, were you reading this at the time, month to month?
I think I was. I certainly was collecting it. I don't know. It wasn't necessarily my favorite series. And we'll get into some of the details as we get along as to maybe why that was. But I think I sort of lapsed a little bit and would just let some of the issues build up. And then I think I came back to reading them kind of as a whole, kind of a little bit later down the pack. But certainly, similar to you, I was paying attention. I was buying them. I was reading them as they were coming out. Certainly for the first few issues, and then slightly lapsed in terms of at least the monthly reading schedule. I think. But yeah, that was my experience. And these first 2 issues were collected in a Reborn trade paperback. So the 2 40-page specials, plus Tim, a 6-page story from Toy Fair from Wizard. Toy Fair issue 79 featured an exclusive 6-page prequel comic, which I didn't know about at the time and didn't read at the time, but Toy Fair were big fans of the G.I. Joe brand and big supporters of Devil's Due and what they were trying to do. And I guess this was a good way of getting that relaunch or new universe version of G.I. Joe in front of a big or different set of eyes. So unusually an exclusive G.I. Joe story outside of the pages of a regular G.I. Joe. And there isn't too many examples of this kind of thing happening in sort of G.I. Joe comics, really, where you've got a key piece of, I guess, continuity or key piece of storytelling, which only exists outside of the pages of the monthly comic.
This is a good reminder. I did not know about this 6-page prequel at the time. I was not reading Toy Fair. I basically never read Toy Fair. And as of 2003, 2004, I had stopped reading Wizard. I think I was reading Wizard for its second year, third year, and fourth year, which goes back to I'm guessing 94, 95, 96. I did buy 2 or 3 issues of Toy Fair along the way that had Larry Hama or G.I. Joe articles, either toy news, or there's some issue of Toy Fair with an interview with Larry Hama. It's half about Wolverine. And so I did not see this story at the time, and I do appreciate you sending it over for me to read before I read today's comic book. I do note that if I was Devil's Due, I would be really pleased to get one of the top, demographically overlapping media magazines to run my 6-page prequel story. However, I might be disappointed that it's Toy Fair and not Wizard, because I gotta believe that the Wizard audience was bigger and more focused on comics, even though, of course, Wizard had some coverage of toys, and certainly Toy Fair, was appealing to comics people. But I remember lots of previews and certainly like mail away like 0 issues or like freebie issues if you bought an issue of Wizard. And I remember almost nothing of that for Toy Fair. Toy Fair, it's like, no, there'd be an offer for some toy. So I don't know if, Wizard was just booked up that month, that year, and this was an amazing like consolation prize, or if like the people at Devil's Due were just really disappointed that they had to settle. But it's still a get.
And also, I guess on the other side of the coin, G.I. Joe is primarily a toy property. And so having it in the pages of a toy magazine might be a way of getting it in front of the eyeballs of toy collectors rather than necessarily comic collectors.
That is a good point. Yeah.
So it is a 6-page original story, only in Toy Fair and reprinted in the trade paperback later on. It's written by the same writer as the G.I. Joe Reborn and Reloaded writer, John Nay Ryber, with art by Eddie Barrows. And it is, I think, sort of pitched as a prequel to even before G.I. Joe Reborn, if I'm reading this correctly, but, same continuity as all of the rest of it. So if we give a bit of an overview of the 6-page story, we're in what seems to be like a former, Soviet kind of communist kind of country of some description. There's a labor camp overseen by some guards, and we've got Stalker and Snake Eyes doing some hard labor, breaking up rocks. There's a big bully, and they have a confrontation which eats up a set of the first 3 pages, somewhat necessarily in a plot point that doesn't get followed up. And then we have Storm Shadow coming in on a helicopter into this prison camp, and Snake Eyes is chatting away to Stalker is chatting away to Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes isn't saying anything, and Snake Eyes is using some broken rocks to fashion some shurikens. And as Storm Shadow makes his way into the jail cell, Snake Eyes makes his escape using his handmade shurikens tied together with something to take down the guards, make his escape. And Stalker says that he is in deep cover and needs to get left behind. And the reason that Storm Shadow is there is to try and recruit his, sword brother Snake Eyes over to the Cobra side. So that's where we have it, leave it. Storm Shadow, established as already part of Cobra at that point, trying to recruit Snake Eyes and having this pre-existing knowledge of the character, and Stalker in deep cover in this gulag, which will be probably a plot point to be followed up in the pages of G.I. Joe Reloaded on sale in March.
Can you go back to the first page of this 6-page prequel story? So we're in this labor camp, and immediately on this first page, I have a little bit of a hard time telling who is who. If I pay attention, it is clear. There are 3 characters who are prisoners. One is a black man, that's Stalker. Although, I find some colorists in comics sometimes pick not the tone that I would pick or that I'm sort of looking for when it comes to.
He looks a little bit more Latino. It's not in terms of his skin tone. It's not quite it's not quite. You wouldn't look at a picture of this guy and think, "Oh yeah, of course that's Stalker."
Yeah, it doesn't jump out as Stalker, also because of his facial hair. And then there are these other 2 sort of white guys in the scene, and one of them, his face is in shadow, but both of them have hammers, and both of them have like the same color pants, and they're sort of, even though you see one close up, he's in shadow, and then the other one there is a panel where you see both of them, and it's not the same person. But there's a lot going on in this page because there's this establishing shot of like guards and barbed wire and a prison building and watchtowers and laborers, and then you've got Snake Eyes who's sort of like hammering something and then eating something, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth panel I understand, but at first glance I find it confusing because it's like who's who, like because two guys are far away, one guy's in shadow, and I get it, you can't show Snake Eyes' face, and of course Snake Eyes isn't talking and he's the guy where you can't see his face. But if you had someone who had never read G.I. Joe comics read this scene, I think they might be confused. I think they could get it on the second or third page. And I think that is a small mistake. And I think it speaks to A, the complexity of G.I. Joe, B, the density of this 6-page story, and also this first page. And then also, it's like, why can't the two guys have different colored pants, right? Or like, why can't Snake Eyes have like shorts and a bandana? And then the like tough guy who's picking on Stalker, he's got long pants and like gloves. It's like, make them as different. If you're going to have two white guys who both have hammers and are shirtless in a prison camp, there's still stuff you can do. Okay. Complaint over. So now do we talk about the creative team? Oh, no. There's one more thing I want to talk about in this preview, on this prequel, excuse me. Can you go to where Storm Shadow shows up? And this is the point that I made when we were talking about the Cobra Reborn special. But since Cobra characters don't appear in the 40-page G.I. Joe Reborn comic, but we do have a Cobra character here, I just want to say it again, that Storm Shadow had never looked like this before, right? He looks like he's from The Matrix, except in white and not black. And I mean, clothing. And this is a look that very much influenced the first live action film. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mark, what do you want to say about the 6-page story, or should we talk about the creative team?
I missed it at the time, but I don't think I missed out onto very much of it. I mean, as we say, half of it is a fairly forgettable sequence about a bickering in the labor camp, and then the rest of it is a breakout of Snake Eyes, which I don't think does much apart from establish that Snake Eyes and Stalker know each other, and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow also know each other, and Stalker is left in this gulag, which presumably we will get back to at some point. So yeah, it would have been nice to have it as part of the collection rather than it being this this fairly hard to know about piece off to the side, but there we go. It is what it is. Let's talk about the main book now. So it is brought to us by creative team of John Nay Ryber, story, and we'll talk about him in a second. Joe Bennett and Javier Solteres on pencils, which is unusual for a first issue. Big Bang. It already looks like they may be running into trouble by in terms of deadlines and so on, having two artists there. We've got two inkers, Rui Jose and Andrew Pepoy. Transparency Digital is on colors. Letters is Dreamer Design. Graphic design, Mike Norton. Cover, Tim Bradstreet, with variant by Francis Manipool, Corey Hampshire, and Beth Setterlow. And no credited editor, strangely enough.
I noticed that, and I'm going to count that as a small oversight and not a bad sign. I think Blaylock is the editor. In your interview with Paul Jenkins, he talks about talking with Josh Blaylock about his approach for this Cobra special. Okay, so
as part of my research of this one, actually, it's sort of I found an interview with Josh Blaylock promoting it, and alongside that was some early prelim art, which included some sketches by Tim Seeley and Josh Blaylock. So on the screen at the moment is a Tim Seeley, I think, Cobra Commander early years design, which you might look as familiar from the pages of Cobra Reborn. There's Stalker in a kind of a leather coats, rock and roll with that sort of modernized look and soul patch and sunglasses, Zartan in this sort of Terminator style studded biker jacket.
We've never seen, go back, we've never seen Zartan so jacked and stout. That is a 5'10", 300-pound muscle Zartan.
We've got Colonel Hawk, as much as he, I think, appears in this issue, sunglasses and sort of military gear. A Baroness in different sort of clothing, and I think they also had a handful of other designs as well. So it was interesting that you think of Blaylock and Seeley being so tied to their kind of era continuity version of G.I. Joe, but actually their fingerprints are actually quite on this version as well in terms of working in the background on these specific designs. So I found that aspect interesting.
I think this brings up a discussion of the necessity of and unnecessity of this kind of relaunch. You know, when Marvel started its Ultimate line in 2000, I thought it was a bad idea. Turned out to be a great idea. Lots of great stories, really invigorated the publishing, and ultimately those are the stories that influenced the movies. Or I mean, I should say the look and feel of those stories. Certainly one of the series in particular. You know, the movies are like half the Ultimate line and half the original Marvel stories from the 60s. With something like G.I. Joe, when I'm looking at these costumes, I think in some ways these costumes are really different, and in other ways they're not that different. And the philosophical question becomes, is this asking the established audience to spend more money on a second version of something that it likes that isn't that different? If it was more different, does it risk not being the core property anymore? You know, if Cobra Commander doesn't wear blue, and if he's like not a 30-year-old man, but like a 12-year-old woman or like a 60-year-old robot, right? Like, does that break Cobra and it's not recognizably G.I. Joe anymore? Overall, is it too similar to the regular G.I. Joe comic that Devil's Due was doing at the time? Does this in fact pull in a new audience? Does this just get some of the existing audience? And ultimately, you know, the series didn't run that long, so we know the answer to these questions. But you know, one of my general thoughts here is that the covers for these two specials looked so different from anything we'd seen before on G.I. Joe and anything that was happening over in the main book at Devil's Due. And that was a great step. And then you open the book and they look kind of different. You know, the art looks, I don't know, a little more detailed, a little more realistic, sort of a little less of the, like, Tim Seeley's work is like a tiny bit more cartoony compared to, say, Eddie Barrows and Joe Bennett. But the coloring is the same and the lettering is the same. And I think if you hand, you know, one of these Reborn issues or one of the regular Devil's Due issues to a non-G.I. Joe fan, they wouldn't necessarily know that it's different. And again, this is a fine line, because if it's too different, it's not G.I. Joe. And if it's not different enough, then what's the point? And ultimately, you know, many brands can't sustain this kind of relaunch. So, Mark, do we talk about the cover? Do we talk about the creative team?
I was just going to touch a bit more on John Nay Ryber. So who is this guy? He sort of entered sort of comics primarily through working with Vertigo and doing the ongoing continuation of Neil Gaiman's The Book of Magic miniseries. He did a 50-issue run from issue 1 through to issue 50. And then his next sort of biggest, you know, high profile was probably this Captain America with on a relaunch of the Captain America for the Marvel Knights imprint in 2003.
May I interrupt for a moment?
Oh, actually 2002 with John Cassaday and Jay Lee on art, which sort of got a bit of headlines in terms of it being kind of almost a response to the events of 9/11.
Yeah, that Captain America relaunch was a really big deal because the main Captain America book had ended, and like twice now. And so here was a new Captain America, but it was going to be more fancy, right? Fancier art, fancier stories, a little bit more grown up. And this opening story arc is a response to the events of 9/11. And the opening pages, in fact, are Steve Rogers in his Captain America uniform digging in the debris at Ground Zero. And it's really striking and uncomfortable and now dated. If you're reading Captain America right now, folks, in 2026, the new Chip Zdarsky run, which I really like, has sort of pulled Captain America into like current times. So he was not around for 9/11 because he woke up out of the ice more recently, which is something you have to do with Captain America every generation. But that Captain America series made a big splash, and suddenly, if you were a Marvel person, you might know this writer's name. And then, Mark, what's that interesting thing that he did?
This interesting thing, Transformers and G.I. Joe for Dreamwave, working with Jay Lee, who he also worked with on Captain America, I believe.
Now,
and it's this. Go on.
We will cover this properly in an episode, and there's a lot to say about it. But in one sentence, it is very cool and very weird.
Yeah. So he'd sort of dipped his toes into the world of G.I. Joe somewhat with this particular series. So this is kind of his second time around on the G.I. Joe brand.
If you're listening and not watching, Mark has put a Jay Lee and June Chung cover to Transformers G.I. Joe issue #1 on screen. It's a triple gatefold, and this is that story that's set in World War II, and the colors are really muted. So that's half of what I mean by weird.
Yeah, and as a contrast, I guess G.I. Joe Reborn and then Reloaded, you've got these amazing covers from Tim Bradstreet and the likes of Adi Granov and so on. Very, very striking covers, a history of John A. Ryber working with these really interesting and striking artists like Jay Lee and John Cassaday. And then the interiors just being a little bit not quite that same level as potentially his previous collaborators, or the covers might lead you to suggest, which I think is kind of, you go in with almost the wind taken out of your sails a little bit straight away from this, where the interiors don't quite match up to kind of the promissory note of the cover, which probably leads us into a look at the covers in the gallery.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Okay, Tim Bradstreet draws and colors the regular cover for G.I. Joe Reborn, issue #1. As with the Cobra Reborn special that I'm holding, this is a wraparound cover. The front half is just one character. This time it's Snake Eyes. Full figure, although he's cropped from his sort of mid shins up. So you're seeing 85% of him. Snake Eyes is holding an Uzi and a sword, and he's in an underground sort of catacomb. There's some stairs behind him. There's an archway, and it's all brick. And even though there's a lot of subtlety in the coloring, it all reads as monochrome, as if it's just sort of sepia toned. Bradstreet's got a great compositional device here where Snake Eyes, who you might lose because he's a dark character with a lot of shadows on him, is almost completely outlined by the highlights in that sepia archway and staircase behind him. Bradstreet's work is always heavily photo referenced to the point where, to my eye, it looks traced. And I don't know if he's tracing or not, but I've seen some of the original photos and then I've seen his images. But he's still making a lot of decisions in terms of contrast, shadow, composition, and color. Then there is a back half of this, which features 3 close-ups of other Joes. We see some guy on the top who looks awesome, some lady in the middle who looks awesome, and some dude on the bottom who looks awesome. Oh, wait, these are actual Joes. It's Duke, it's Lady J, and it's rock and roll. I would not have guessed that that's Duke from the top view. Lady J, yeah. And then I thought maybe Chuckles, but no, it's rock and roll with his new soul patch goatee, not a beard and mustache, and very cool Oakley sunglasses. But the treatment on this back cover is the 3 images are like surveillance video captures or photos where each of these characters is looking away, but there's a crosshairs or like a central circle on them, and then their name and their code name and their rank and one bit about them. And then
like if you were in some sort of espionage type film and you're in the situation room and they're calling up the digital files on the screen.
This doesn't feel like Cobra is targeting them for assassination. This feels like the boss is like, get me Hauser, get me Hart Burnett, get me McConnell, get me Rambo. And then on the bottom is a map of the world, and it's like green tech lines on black with some graphics for like airplanes and stuff. So it's a cool cover, and I think Mark makes a very good point about the covers of these 2 specials not quite agreeing with the insides. And Marvel had done something similar with its Ultimate line, where those earliest comics, like the first issue or 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man, the first issue or 2 of Ultimate X-Men, were pencil drawings of Spider-Man or Wolverine, and then very heavily digitally painted, but then comped on a photo background. And then the photo background sort of gave way to like a drawn background that was heavily computer painted. And that was the look of the Ultimate comics. And then they had that sort of vertical bar treatment on the left and right, so that you knew from a distance those were the other Spider-Man and X-Men comics. G.I. Joe is not doing that here. There's no graphical elements here except for the word Reborn that says not the regular continuity. But again, the Tim Bradstreet covers go a long way towards that. Mark, you made a comment when you were running through the creative team.
Well, the graphics do still say G.I. Joe, a real American hero, which is...
That's right. That's a good point. Yes, it doesn't say, Ultimate G.I. Joe, Deluxe G.I. Joe, Absolute G.I. Joe. It doesn't say G.I. Joe Reloaded yet. It says G.I. Joe just like the other G.I. Joe. And then there's the added word. And I wonder, maybe that's an oversight. Maybe that's Hasbro. Like it has to say a real American hero. But the modern comparison is that right now Skybound is publishing 2 monthly G.I. Joe comics in different continuities. One is G.I. Joe, a real American hero, which has been around since '82, and one is just called G.I. Joe, and it does not have a subtitle, and that logo does change color every month. Okay, Mark, you made a point.
Before you move on to that one, just to finish up on the covers, can you have a look at the back of your G.I. Joe Reborn cover? And read to me, what is, how do they describe Duke here?
Hauser, Conrad S., codename Duke, Master Sergeant, U.S. Special Operations Command.
Can you read that third line again?
Master Sergeant.
Looking at the second word.
Is Sergeant misspelled? Yikes.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
I've got 2 error detecteds for the inside edition. Just you wait, sir. Right?
Okay. Do you want to move on to your next?
Right here in my notes.
Oh dear. Yeah, go on, move on to the thought that I kept on interrupting.
So you said when you were going through the creative team that it's unusual or maybe not a good sign that this, first issue, zero issue, whatever special has 2 pencilers and 2 inkers. Don't forget that the Cobra Reborn special had 3 pencilers and 3 inkers, although the main penciler and the main inker were given top billing, and the secondary pencilers and inkers, I don't know if they just did. I think they did a couple pages near the end, but in that Cobra special, you can tell pretty immediately that some of the pages have less attention paid to them, so the first 30 pages here of G.I. Joe Reborn are drawn by Joe Bennett, and then starting at page 31, it switches over to Javier Salters. And Javier Salters is an artist who, for the longest time, I couldn't tell what his art looked like, because my only exposure to his work was the 1990 Ghost Rider series, of which he penciled the first year, inked by Mark Texiera. And Tex's inking was so wonderfully overpowering. And then Tex, for the second year, penciled and inked. And I can definitely see the change in storytelling. But for the longest time, when I saw Javier Salters' name, I just thought of Tex's inking. And many years later, I can finally see what Salters' work looks like, particularly since, Mark, don't forget, he did a little bit of G.I. Joe for IDW.
Okay. And the two artists, I think, aren't dramatically different. It isn't too jarring. They are, right. I think, sympathetic to one another. I remembered that we hadn't quite finished a couple of points on the covers. The first of which was that this Snake Eyes design from Bradstreet, like the Cobra design, had quite a lot of impact, I think, and it influenced what they did with the toys. That there was a number of Snake Eyes toys that sort of leaned into this design with the shin pad, the knee pads, and the sort of the folds, the wrinkles in the mask. I'm just sharing on the screen a couple of the examples where it sort of leaned heavily into that design, and I think sort of like the webbing and all of the gear and the tech that he had, I think also kind of lingered on in a lot of the Snake Eyes toys that we've seen since then. So it was a kind of almost sort of instantly iconic version of Snake Eyes that sort of came through on this particular cover. And then I can move on to actually the variant cover that we had for this one. As mentioned, variant by Francis Manapul with Corey Hampshire and Beth Setelo.
So this drawing is, a standard comics art style of the, 90s, early 2000s, where characters have like slightly big eyes. It's a little bit cartoony. It's a little bit manga influenced. Snake Eyes' costume is kind of shiny, and the coloring is, modern comics coloring of the 90s and 2000s. And I do like this cover, and it is a cool montage, but it in no way captures any of that sort of different gravitas texture of the Timothy Bradstreet covers. And you might think that this is a cover for one of the other Devil's Due G.I. Joe comics. And so what we see here is divided into quadrants, basically. The top left is a montage. It's all a montage. Scarlet's head, Duke with a machine gun, but he's kind of smaller. Behind them are the red and white stripes of the flag. Top right, the blue with the white stars of the flag. Bottom left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Joes. It's everyone who shows up in the issue, Roadblock, Lady J, etc. They're sort of full body and further away, but bunched together at the ready with weapons. And then the bottom right is Snake Eyes holding his sword above his head, not like a baseball bat, but kind of like a baseball bat. I mean that as a compliment. I'll give Devil's Due. I give Devil's Due a hard time for some things, but they sure came up with some, as you say, kind of instantly iconic cover images. And this one I don't think has been widely reproduced because I never see it when I Google, G.I. Joe Reloaded or G.I. Joe Reborn. And when I Google G.I. Joe Francis Manipul, his covers for G.I. Joe Declassified come up, and not this one. This is a very cool cover. I do always have a tiny problem when Duke is wearing a black shirt, because to me that's not Duke. Duke should wear yellow shirts or beige shirts. If he's wearing a black shirt, then I think it's someone else, like, I don't know, Rock and Roll having shaved, or Chuckles. I don't know. But I like to have the diagonal of Duke's machine gun matches the diagonal of Snake Eyes' sword. Shall
I do a quick plot breakdown
Yes.
on this one? So this is super quick because I don't think I could cope with just a full plot breakdown. So here we go.
Plot breakdown.
The G.I. Joe team is introduced, assembled, and formed. Hawk sends them in on their first mission to protect from a Cobra assault on Mount Silver, an experimental weapons facility. The new terrorist threat Cobra has arrived before them and made off with the weapons, including a new powerful weapon, Black Dragon 6. That's it. There's a lot more that happens in the issue.
You know what? Since we're jumping around a little bit, since we interrupted covers with talking about the creative team, and then I remembered I wanted to say one more thing about the creative team. So I said something about Javier Salters. Joe Bennett was on my radar when he drew this special, because when Priest, the writer Priest, when his Black Panther run ended, Marvel had him spin off a series called The Crew, sometimes just called Crew. And it ran only 6 or 7 issues, and it's great. And it picked up a thread from his Black Panther, and Joe Bennett drew that whole thing. And it is collected in the 4th volume of the larger trade paperback Black Panther by Christopher Priest. And that was only, I think, 1 year, 2003, before this, or maybe he was even doing it the same year. So, in terms of expectations, we can do one more sort of overall thought, Mark. The cover's been promoted months in advance. The concept has been promoted months in advance. We didn't see the the prequel in Toy Fair, but some people did. The writer is hot. The artists are not hot, but like really solid. Like these two guys can tell a story, and they can draw with a little bit of slick character, but they're also not drawing, like superhero-y pinup pages. They're drawing like people moving in space with weapons and fighting. And so I was looking forward to this, and I recall liking the Cobra special. So I was, looking forward to the G.I. Joe special. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Mark, first impressions on your reread.
So I think, as you say, we'd got a good experience from the Cobra Reborn special, which kind of raised the bar on the expectations a little bit. And I think this didn't feel kind of a piece. My kind of high level thoughts about this on the reread was that it didn't seem particularly connected to the Cobra story that we'd just read. That that had finished on a cliffhanger with these Cobra signs appearing, and that kind of didn't seem to be particularly followed up. We were introduced a heck of a lot of Joes pretty quickly, but it felt like if you didn't necessarily have a lot of pre-established knowledge, you might not necessarily know who those were, what their significance was. And then I just was thoroughly confused by the end of the story when we sort of flipped to their mission and the thing that the MacGuffin that is driving that mission at the end of it, and the G.I. Joe characters who are Cobras. Quite what the situation was with that. I don't know if I missed something in the story, or is it the story, or is it me missing something? I'm not entirely sure, but we got these two Joes at the end of the story who are in Cobra uniforms, and I felt like I didn't quite understand why that was the case. Are they disillusioned and have they joined Cobra, or are we meant to know that they're in disguise in pretending to be cobras.
Before I forget, I just want to point out, picking up a specific thread from your reference of two Joes in Cobra uniforms. At the end of that scene, there's a panel where we have a close-up on some little device in the grass, and then we cut to headquarters, and they're like, "We're getting Morse code," and I'm thinking, awesome. Which of those two Joes is actually doing the Morse code? Is it even one of those two Joes? Okay. Overall, part of the strength of the Cobra special is that it's about one guy and a philosophy. It's basically a solo comic. It's called Cobra, or G.I. Joe Cobra Reborn, but it's really a Cobra Commander special. And even though a lot of other characters show up, Storm Shadow, Destro, is the Baroness in it, Major Blood, Zartan. So Cobra Commander plus 5 characters. And then you get, like a scientist and a military guy and a Pentagon guy and the president of the US. It really does follow one person. And as you and I said when we reviewed that issue, it's not quite a new take on him, but a really sort of energized take on him. And this G.I. Joe comic is a team book. You can see it starting to be mostly about Duke. And there's 2 pages where I thought, oh, this sort of looks ahead to how Duke is portrayed now in the Joshua Williamson Energon universe as this, daredevil risk taker, fighter. But this comic, and maybe rightly so, it's not just a solo book where Duke assembles a team or Hawk assembles a team. You have these like 4-page scenes where Scarlet gets introduced and she does a thing and she has a connection to the conspiracy or plot, and Stalker gets introduced and along with Lady J, and there's some backstory that's a little confusing that's referred to. I appreciate the effort. I couldn't follow it. And then they're on this mission.
Right. We are introduced to Stalker as well, who doesn't have a moustache or beard.
Right.
And okay, so I'm not too sure how it then connects to the 6-page thing. If the 6-page thing where he's in this gulag is before or
I
after,
think
maybe after.
Interesting.
But no, it can't be because Snake Eyes appears in this issue.
I think it's way before.
Yeah, so it's before.
And then there is a clever overlap where in both comics, Cobra blows up the Golden Gate Bridge, right? It takes place on page. Am I jumping ahead to something that you wanted to talk about?
It's when we're introduced to. Here we go. When we're introduced to Rock and Roll, Craig McConnell with his soul patch.
I will put the Cobra page on my screen, and you can have the G.I. Joe page on the sort of main screen. And are these the same? These are not the same drawings.
I don't think they are the same.
No, they are.
Are they?
Yeah. Yeah. The one that you have on screen from the G.I. Joe comic does not have a sound effect, and it's cropped a little bit. The bottom section isn't there.
Yeah. But, put it on the screen from the Cobra book. Yeah.
And that's okay. That's clever. And
it's nice that there is that overlap piece that it connects the two. Yeah.
And not just in an overlap. When it happens in the Cobra special, you think, oh no, Cobra's has this sequence of terrorist attacks, and one of them is, in America, and that's bad. I know the Golden Gate Bridge. And then you're reading the G.I. Joe comic, and it sneaks up on you because, Rock and Roll is surfing and with his girlfriend, and she's awesome and bodacious. And then the bridge blows up. And radical, and then the bridge blows up and she dies. And so you realize, oh, that was happening off panel, sort of zoomed in during the Cobra special that I read last month. And so now, Roadblock has a reason to
Rock and Roll.
Rock and Roll has a stake in this fight. So that was clever. But I do think that so again, let's just count. right? Cobra Commander is really about Cobra is really about one character, Cobra Commander, plus 5 Cobras, and G.I. Joe is about
Duke,
1,
Scarlet,
2, 3,
Stalker,
4.
Lady J. Was that 5? Stalk.
Go back to
Duke,
the Francis Manipul cover; they're all there. Plus Hawk.
J. Rock and Roll, Roadblock, Snake Eyes, Doc, Beachhead, Hawk. So 10.
Yeah. And, just doing the math, this might have needed to have been an 80-page story, or, some things could have, maybe some things needed to have been simplified or combined. So, from the beginning, let me grab my notes. Okay. So my sort of comment about the first 3 pages is, Duke is being awesome. And I don't think he ever acted like this in the Larry Hama Real American Hero comic. I don't remember if he acted like this in the Devil's Due, Josh Blaylock, Brandon Jerwa comic, but this does feel like 20 years later how he acts in the Skybound comic. So that's kind of fun. And then the second scene is in this first panel, this first panel immediately tells you that this ain't your daddy's G.I. Joe. This is Ultimate G.I. Joe. This is G.I. Joe Reloaded. Because if you remember Scarlett's file card, or what's the 2-parter with the families from 1985?
The Captives of Cobra.
Captives of Cobra, right? With her like brothers and her dad, right? And they all know martial arts. So in this first panel, right, it's a cool like diagonal composition, so it can fit in a horizontal panel. And she's walking. She's got a leather jacket. She's walking in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a really dramatic sunset. The sky's red and orange. And the second caption says, O'Hara Combat Systems International Central Office. And at the bottom of the skyscraper, there's giant letters that glow that say OCS. And she says, I don't know, guys. I think she's saying this to herself. She's outside. She's not talking to anyone. She says, I don't know, guys. I think I liked it better when it was just a dojo. So immediately, right, John A. Reiber is telling us and showing us that this is not the established G.I. Joe where she's just going to be in a martial arts room grappling with her brothers and her dad, like from that episode, like from the file card, right? They like run a company. And in the second panel, there's a secretary, there's a receptionist at a desk with a computer, and there's a glass door, and behind it, there's a dojo. Okay, so my comment on this scene is, I like how sort of naturalistically she walks in and not everyone is identified. I know G.I. Joe and I think, oh, these are her brothers. I don't have her file card memorized, and I haven't watched Captives of Cobra in a long time. So I'm thinking, okay, these are her brothers, I think. And then she mentions her uncle. And then like on the second or third page, she mentions her dad. And then I think, oh, wait, how many of these guys are her age? And how many of them are a generation older? And which one is which? And then I thought, oh, and then one of them has this like horror movie transformation where suddenly he's looks like a desiccated corpse, but he's not dead, but he might die. And that's, awesome and shocking and gross. And I think, okay, I don't know if I need like the full Larry Hama approach where Mark, I say your name in some dialogue. And you're like, that's right, Tim, we are hosting an episode of Talking Joe. Or like some captions, like a little yellow box over guy number 1, guy number 2, guy number 3, guy number 4. It's like brother so-and-so, brother so-and-so, so-and-so dad, so-and-so uncle. But I read this scene and I thought, generally I know who everyone is, but I actually don't know who's who in this scene. And it doesn't really matter. But the fact that I don't know was distracting and took me out of it. And that's pages 4, 5, and 6 of this, double-sized issue 1. And it's a misstep right after a pretty strong opening scene on pages 1, 2, and 3. And it is representative of sort of what happens in the rest of this comic, where there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, and you have to sort of connect this scene back to the fact that Dan here, who's turning into a dehydrated Ra's al Ghul, back to the fact that the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, where they are now, was the scene of this, Cobra break-in or something that happened in the previous Cobra Reborn, where, and so that's, again, a little bit of a connecting point, but a bit of a confusing one, perhaps, as it felt like, was there some sort of trigger point that suddenly made this happen to Dan? And why is it just him and not the rest of the family? And have they been touched and exposed and all this? It was a little bit confusing as to kind of what the dynamics are about this CDC outbreak are, to me anyway.
I think about the mechanics of comics when I'm looking at this page and thinking about this scene, and I need at least one thing to change. Either I need more pages so there can be some more dialogue and some more choreography so the characters can, without sort of being rushed, like the scene is really dense, and I appreciate that it's dense, so that someone can explain something additional, or the dialogue and staging that is here needs to be revised, or the number of elements that are in this scene needs to be reduced. Like, for example, what if instead of, like, part of what throws me off with this scene is that she shows up in the middle of a martial arts lesson. So it's not just her brothers and her uncle and her dad. It's also some students who I'm guessing are like 30 years old and some of their security contractors, although I don't know. And those characters aren't important. And in fact, we see two of them, I think, on this page that we're looking at. Is this page 5? Maybe it's page 6, where she's saying, "Dad, does Uncle Dan still run security over at the CDC?" And behind her is a man and a woman in this black uniform, and they're looking concerned. And I appreciate that, other people are involved, but it's asking a lot of this scene that there are 5 speaking roles plus how many students are like observing the lesson? 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5, 6, because way back on page 4, like between her brothers and uncle and dad, there's like 3 silhouettes. That's a little unclear. So like, what if, let's just restage this scene a little bit. What if it's like, okay, so her brother has to touch her uncle so he can also be maybe infected. So they can't just be sitting in a boardroom. But what if we just take the other students out of this scene? And what if it's just Scarlet and her 4 family members? And now it's sort of easier to compose the panels because you don't have to account for, you still want to draw some backgrounds, but you don't have to account for all these other people who don't get identified and don't speak and actually don't do anything.
And then the next scene, we're introduced to the next 2 Joes, Sergeant Lonzo R. Wilkinson, aka Stalker, and Captain Allison R. Hart Burnett on a field mission to investigate a terrorist group. Tim.
But in a way, Mark, here we were also introduced to a 3rd Joe, because there's a reference to a Joe codename. And it's not someone we see in this scene, but it's someone who shows up later in the comic.
A little bit later. Mm-hmm.
And so you're on page 7. If you go forward to page 8, in the second and third panel, Stalker with no identifying facial hair says, he's got a cute nickname for Lady J. He says, "Tell me, Captain Debutante, since you're above the honorable traditions of rank and courtesy, do you still have nightmares about Beachhead?" And she says, "I do. He usually winds up." She says, "I do. He usually winds up with no teeth and a broken neck. Now hump that pack, Wilkinson. Let's do your job." And I think, okay, I know G.I. Joe. Beachhead is a G.I. Joe character. He's awesome. My brother had the figure, so in my mind, Beachhead isn't mine. He's Kevin's. And that's how it is with half of all Joes. From 82 to 92, folks. They're not mine, they're Kevin's. And I think, so I got to this and I thought, oh, cool, they mentioned another Joe. And then I thought, oh, did I miss something? Is this back in the 6-page prequel? Okay, it's probably not in the Cobra special. Oh, is he in this scene? Like, oh, no, they're talking about something that happened weeks or months or years ago. Oh, It sounds terrible. Okay, well, the point of this scene is to not just introduce Beachhead as a notion of a character, but to demonstrate that Lady J is a badass, but also that something went wrong. And I think she messed up. And I'm okay with not knowing. It's going to hopefully get clarified later.
It sounds like almost like a mission that's gone terribly wrong. That's meant to be like traumatic flashbacks, or maybe, but thinking about it, maybe he's just saying, you know, were you trained by Beachhead and he's a badass and he gives the people he's training a hard time. So do you have nightmares about the training that Beachhead gave you? Maybe. But yeah, that wasn't my first. That wasn't where I went with my interpretation initially. But given that we see Beachhead later on and he's not messed up, right. then maybe that's it. But they call her a debutante, like she's a bit of a rich girl, la-di-da, slumming it with them, which wasn't necessarily something that I'd associated with her as a character before. But her background is that she's got a birthplace of Martha's Vineyard. She went to study at Trinity College in Dublin, so she's sort of, you know, very internationally well traveled. Martha's Vineyard, is that quite does that, you know, is that got a reputation of being a bit posh and la-di-da?
Yes.
So I guess that's what they're leaning into there.
You know, I just want to, for all the picking on this that we're doing, I do want to acknowledge that the Devil's Due always makes dense G.I. Joe comics that are worth your money. And, you know, there's never like 3 pages with just 2 panels per page where, you know, the art is, you know, they're trying to, the writer is never creating moments where the artist is just going to be able to sell the original art. They're always aware that this is a team book, good guy team, bad guy team, big cast, lots of supporting characters, gear, environments, and lots of dialogue. Not too much dialogue, but, you know, people are explaining things and they're interacting. And so, you know, I would rather a comic that a little too much is going on and I have to pay attention than not much is going on and I feel like, you know, I'm not getting my money's worth. I'm going to point out here on the page that you have on screen, and then one more panel that comes a little bit later. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, you're on page 12 right now. This will be one of my 2 examples of how I don't like the coloring in this comic. The second panel here, there's a big panel. It's not a splash, but it's almost a splash. And so camera's low. We're looking past Lady J. We don't see her face, but we see her legs and her pistol. And the 1, 2, 3, 4 soldiers who were with her and Stalker on the mission are sort of far away, and they're all blind, right? One of them says, Sarge, is that you? It's him. And then they mentioned that there was this laser weapon, right? And I don't know what's going on with the leaves at the top of this panel, but there's this crazy highlight as if it's a full moon and as if the moon is like 100 feet above these trees. And I get it. It's not real life. Comics can have stylistic decisions and, you know, colorists can, you know, accentuate and make creative decisions. But there is this style of coloring from the 90s and 2000s. And it lingers with some colorists to this day, where no matter what the time of day or environment is, like things are just over rendered. And I would much rather there be fewer colors on this page than the ones that are here. And then I'm going to jump to a different scene. Do you have page 22 lined up, Mark? That's the one where Snake Eyes is on the roof. And he is, yeah, here we are. Okay, so just a tiny example, like it's all over the page, but I'll just point out one thing. On panel 5, Snake Eyes is pushing his weapon and then about to crawl into the vents, the like duct on the roof of this military base, and there is a very bright, shiny metallic highlight on the side of this duct, and it's not just nighttime scenes where I think transparency digital is overdoing it. It's every scene. But like, I don't know what the light source is, and I don't know why that piece of metal needs to be so shiny. And
I thought you were going to point out the crazy highlight that he's got on his scope on his rifle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
it's not helpful if you're a sniper just to have a crazy reflection like that.
But imagine if this was a current 2026 issue of Real American Hero, colored by Francesco Segala, how like muted but interesting this would be. Imagine if this was like not drawn by Tom Riley, but in the Tom Riley issues and colored by Jordi Belair. Like, there might be pink, there might be green, it might be weird, but it would be like, I would argue, under control. And I think the colors here are out of control, and they're not behaving the way that light behaves. Things are way too reflective. There are way too many light sources. Okay, end complaint about color. Okay. I did jump ahead a bunch of pages. Do you want to go back to
so we're in the
9 or 10?
We're in the Pentagon next up, and we're introduced to Hawk, who's a maverick who won't play by the rules, Tim. And he's getting in an argument with a 2-star general who is late for the meeting and insisting on an ID check. And he goes as far as to ripping off his stars for some reason. And yeah, not making any friends.
So when this happened, I thought, oh, that 2-star general is Zartan, and Hawk knows it. Because there is no way that you would assault a 2-star general in the Pentagon, period. Like, oh, I'm sorry, everyone. Devil's Due had to cancel the series because Hawk gets thrown in jail at the end of this comic and is never let out. And like, I get it. It's really dramatic. It's kind of funny, and it does demonstrate, what a cool character he is. But it goes too far. Mm-hmm. And you just wouldn't do that. I appreciate how it's a dramatic bit of character writing and interaction, but it strains credulity.
And they have helpfully given Hawk brown hair, so that we don't necessarily mistake him quite so easily with Duke, who is dressed in a sort of similar looking green uniform on the computer. And I say Duke, but is he? Because as we sort of progress through the scene, we find out that Duke, in his black t-shirt, has escaped from that initial scene in the slaughterhouse.
I think it's a brown
t-shirt. There's 2 Dukes. Well, brown. Look on the...
Go back to page 1.
Page 1, it's black, isn't it?
No. Here.
Okay, maybe. I don't know.
It's okay.
On the Francis Manapul cover, it's black. That's what's.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You're right. It's sort of it maybe is a different color, although on the third panel.
Oh, right.
Very black.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm always interested in how often in a G.I. Joe continuity Zartan is used pretending to be someone that we know. Like in the animated series, he mostly pretends to be like generals and scientists, and I think once like Cobra Commander, but he doesn't actually pretend to be the Joes as much. And he's got this amazing gimmick. He can look and sound like anyone, and the animated series isn't going to worry about like where's the duffel bag where he keeps his change of costume, because he like always tears the costume off and it's like the Zartan costume beneath it, and then like the voice changes and then he laughs. Like in the live action movies, the first 2, there's a big swing because he's the president. In the Energon universe right now, no spoilers, he has shown up and it's interesting. Maybe you can remind me, who does he pretend to be in like issue 48 in the Marvel run? when he sneaks into the pit?
Well, he comes into the pit initially as Ripcord, doesn't
Ripcord?
he? And then
Okay.
he sort of is various characters like Duke and Doc and so on.
And then Sergeant Slaughter punches him.
Mhm.
And that's it. And on the one hand, Larry Hama is not making use of this amazing character, although he's not that kind of villain who's going to infiltrate the pit anymore and like take out G.I. Joe. He's got other loyalty problems and challenges. But I do appreciate the sort of restraint, that like Hama hasn't had Zartan do this over and over. But how exciting, and oh no, are they like using something so powerful so early? But like, folks, we are in the second comic of this entire new G.I. Joe continuity, and Zartan has already infiltrated the Pentagon as a G.I. Joe character. He's not like that 2-star general from the previous page. He's not like one of the random people who was like taking ID cards at the security checkpoint. He's Duke, which I think is as much about sort of the pacing of this new series, this new continuity, as it is about the sort of high stakes of it. That, Zartan is, a powerful player and he's being put on the board immediately. So, Mark, how does this scene strike you?
It's an interesting one, and I like the fact that they've got Duke sort of coming in from that first scene, and you kind of you can piece together the dots then that he has broken out, and that's the real Duke. I like that bit. I think for a new reader who was coming to G.I. Joe without having lots of G.I. Joe prior experience, it probably is quite confusing because they don't really explain what is going on, and the fact that we've got Zartan here who is a shape changer. So I could see someone who is less familiar with G.I. Joe being a little bit left behind by that scene and just not knowing what the heck was going on. But yeah, as a long-standing G.I. Joe reader who knows about Zartan and the fact that he's this shape changer, you can follow it. But otherwise, I think it would be a struggle.
Go back a page before this, or 2 pages before this sort of Duke versus Duke surprise. One more page, if you would. We have the connection with Scarlet, where finger quotes Duke and Hawk are talking about Shauna O'Hara and how she's in quarantine, and Hawk is going to go see her. So do we take it to mean that Zartan, disguised as Duke here, is trying to keep Scarlet off the board, or he's the person who put this Cobra symbol here? Or is this the moment when the Cobra symbol shows up on the last 2 pages of the Cobra special? This is another thing that I think could use a little more room to breathe or developing. That on its surface, I understand that Hawk is just going to go see Scarlet in person, and that something went wrong and she's in quarantine, and that Zartan, disguised as Duke, points out the Cobra symbol, right? And Hawk says, "From outside, that's impossible. Some pencil-pushing OPSEC weasel must have flagged O'Hara's file." And then I start to get a little confused. Like, when I look back at this, like, how much damage is Zartan doing here, disguised as Duke? Did he not do enough damage because his cover's blown, because the real Duke walks in 2 panels later? And that is a really fun surprise. But Joe Bennett does pull it off. If you can go forward 1 page, the 3rd panel on the next page, where Zartan, disguised as Duke, says, "Took your face," and he's elbowing Hawk in the back of the neck. Yikes! Who goes, "Ung!" And then the real Duke is on the right side. And Joe Bennett pulled it off. That is the same face on the left as on the right, without being like a perfect left-right mirror image. And one is the fake guy in costume, the other is the real guy who just escaped prison. Actually, which sort of begs the question: how did a real Duke get into the Pentagon? Did he have his ID on him? Like, when he was when he was not a captive of Cobra, that's an episode of G.I. Joe. When he was captured by Cobra and hanging from a meat hook in a Unbow slaughterhouse in Arlington, Virginia. Did they not take his wallet?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna let that go.
And this page that we're looking at now actually sort of has got something that I noticed across a few of the panels, is that the dialogue sequencing is a little bit wonky. You've got in panel 4 here, Zartan says, "Took your face," and then "He won't be. Get this place locked down. I'm fine." But you're kind of having to read left to right and up. "I'm fine. He won't be."
Yeah.
It's
I'm
a
fine
little bit wonky.
I'm
It
fine
needs to be
wants
higher up.
Wants to move. Higher up. Yeah. This is
You
page
kind of
6.
you kind of, as a reader, you're going like that. You're starting at the top, reading to the right, going down, reading. So if you're starting up and right, that would normally be a little bit. You'd sequence that bit ahead of down and left. Probably.
Yeah.
It's messy. But
this is page 16 for anyone who's listening and counting along.
And there's a few bits of that where the sort of the dialogue placing is a little bit messy and making things slightly less clear than they could otherwise be. But to the story point, Duke or actually Zartan as Duke here is slogging through the service records of potential G.I. Joe candidates to help Hawk shortlist them. So as to how much Zartan and Cobra know at this point, and how much of a spanner they've put in the works, is not completely clear. While
we're picking on Dreamer Design for its lettering, back on page 16, the final panel, one of my least favorite lettering ticks. Yeah. On the final panel, when the real Duke says "security" on the final panel, the I in security has serifs, and an I only wants serifs if it's the word I, a letter by itself, not if it's in a word like in or insidious or security.
Or fine.
Or fine.
As per the dialogue balloon immediately before.
Yes. And not as the word balloon immediately after. Get security into. It happens twice in that word balloon. 3 times. Security into section C. All 3 of those words have eyes.
Let's move on before Tim has an aneurysm about these serifs. So next up is Petty Officer First Class Navy SEAL Craig S. McConnell surfing under the Golden Gate Bridge with his girlfriend Captain Min when the bridge is blown up, killing Min. It's not Captain Min. And she's got cutting edge MP3 player with wired connection.
2 comments about the opening panel of this surfing scene with rock and roll and his lady friend. 1, I think the Golden Gate Bridge is red. And 2, if he's now, wait, who said he's a Navy SEAL? Did you say he's a Navy SEAL?
I did. It says Petty Officer First Class Craig S. McConnell, U.S. Navy. I was taking the G.I.JOE summary as being for the full thing, so I'm assuming that it's referenced somewhere, but possibly not.
Is rock and roll? Let me just go to G.I.JOE. Rock and roll. Is he in the Navy? He is. He's in the infantry in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
Advanced infantry training, covert ops school. Okay, so in Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter Parker works for what was it called back in issue 1? Like bugle.net or something. It wasn't like a newspaper, the Daily Bugle. It was like some web thing. And that's fine. You can update this stuff. Whether he's actually Navy SEAL or just in the Navy, you can change things, you can update things. As a general rule for me, for G.I. Joe, I want the characters to stay in their which of the 5 services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, I want them to stay there, basically. And someone can get promoted, someone can get more training. But when I think of rock and roll, I don't think of the water. I mean, yes, surfing, but I think of him holding a machine gun on the ground. So that bit there on this first panel, U.S. Navy, jumps out at me.
I found the reference to him being a SEAL, which is page 32. When
Very
we
good.
see rock and roll again, he says, "Hey, SEAL man, among the Hawks, I'm known as rock and roll. I'm sorry, man, about your woman. I'm coping, giant man, but it's harsh. Giant man, come on, rock. When I talk to the Hawk, he calls me Roadblock." Okay, right. So that's the bit where we find...
It's even earlier, because rock and roll says, "I was with the teams, the SEALs." Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So
that last little bit is where we realize that rock and roll and Roadblock are both undercover working for Hawk.
Do we realize it?
Well, I didn't.
Let's come back to this scene. Let's go back to the Golden Gate Bridge that's not red, where rock and roll is surfing. Also, I don't know what the water is like under the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know if people surf there.
I doubt it. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but
I've been there. I feel like the water is a little bit calm, but someone can let us know in the comments or on Facebook. Anyway, so
let's see.
She can't hear.
Can you?
Oh no! Please don't ask the internet on your phone.
Can you surf at the Golden Gate Bridge?
I think you have to say California. Do you have a lot of experience asking your phone?
Not while Golden Gate. It's a shortcut to Google.
Okay.
Oh, yes, you can surf under the Golden Gate Bridge at a spot called Fort Point, but is exclusively for highly experienced surfers due to extremely dangerous, fast-moving currents.
Okay.
There's a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is painted red.
And in fact, this scene does take place at Fort Point Park.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Good job. John A. Reiber and mysterious uncredited editor. Okay. This is, we should back up and sort of remind ourselves that we have almost never seen a G.I. Joe story like this, because when the Marvel series started, the team already had formed. And later, there were some flashbacks to some of the characters on pre-G.I. Joe missions when they're in the military. And then many years later, at Devil's Due, Larry Hama writes this 3-issue miniseries, G.I. Joe Declassified, which is a mission that takes place before issue 1. But what we're seeing right here is rock and roll before he's a G.I. Joe team member. The same way that a few pages earlier, we're seeing Scarlet before she joins. And we're going to get there, but there's a page at the end where Hawk says, "Are you all joining the team?" And they all join the team. And so I think it's embedded in everything we've been saying in this review and in the Cobra episode, but I think we should spell it out. In Marvel issue 1, 1982, G.I. Joe already exists, Cobra already exists. When Devil's Due publishes its issue number 1 in 2001, it's a continuation of Marvel. When IDW starts its new continuity in 2007, I forget. There are 3 series run at the same time, so slightly different takes on the timeline, but so I don't actually remember. But and then when the Energon universe starts, there is no G.I. Joe. And when I sell people at my store on the Duke miniseries Cobra Commander miniseries, Destro, Scarlet, and like Transformers issue 2, I point and I say, this is them forming the team. And then there's this monthly called G.I. Joe. So it's upsetting to see a Joe lose someone who means something to them. We sort of only heard about this or seen this in flashbacks, but it's happening in the present tense here in this scene.
And unlike Skybound, where we've yet to be introduced to Snake Eyes in that universe, here at the off, we have got Snake Eyes fully formed in his in a visor costume, and setting up as a sniper on the rooftop, and then hiding into a duct for some reason at Fort Detrick, Maryland, U.S. Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, where Scarlet is being treated. But we don't really, in this issue, we don't quite understand what the deal is with Snake Eyes.
It is worth just repeating that he does show up in that 6-page prequel. We don't see his face. So presumably he's already been injured and he doesn't speak. They say he's the guy who doesn't speak. So yes, Snake Eyes does show up in the prequel story in the first issue, seemingly fully formed. And the way that this scene plays out, he's protective of Scarlet, but it is unclear. And I'm fine with, I'll say vague, not unclear. I'm fine with the amount of vagueness. It's not unclear, like, I don't know what's going on. I do have a problem, though, something in terms of what's going on, is that the page that we're looking at right now, page 22, Snake Eyes. Okay, page 22. New scene. We cut to this military installation with barbed wire. It's nighttime. And this guy in black is scaling the building. And then you turn the page, and from page 22 to 23, we're down on the ground, and there's a military guy who gets out of a military building, and then Snake Eyes is crawling under the barbed wire, and then he's planting a bomb. And I thought, oh, he's wearing night vision goggles now. And then that, oh, no, this is someone else. Oh, it's Firefly, I think. And then I thought, okay, that's not unclear. It might be confusing, because if I didn't know G.I. Joe, the 3 costume cues that differentiate Snake Eyes from Firefly, right? Snake Eyes has the silver visor. Firefly has night vision goggles. Firefly has like ribbing on his sort of the way that Beachhead's mask is, like his sweatshirt, whereas Snake Eyes is wearing other gear. And then it's subtle. Snake Eyes has some blue in his black costume, and Firefly has some sort of a reddish green. It's really subtle. I don't know if the colorists were trying to make them different or just sort of got lucky. So they are different costumes. But I gotta say, if you're reading this a little casually, if you're not like really paying attention, or let's just say paying attention, you're going to turn the page and think that you're like still on the roof, and there's like a part of the building that sticks up even higher, or like, oh, how'd the mystery guy in black who's wearing a mask get down here? Oh, he's planting a bomb. And I think to your point about if you haven't read a G.I. Joe comic, this transition from page 22 to 23 is asking too much, and it needs like one thing for sure, but at least I think 2 things to differentiate them. And what threw me off was these 2 military guys, the guard or the person driving him to get out, they're walking in the doors and they're talking, right? We transferred her here at 1600 hours, sir, as per your order. And then the other guy says, any hostiles entering her hospital room of record? Well, they're going to get a big surprise. Sharp work, Corporal. We'll be out of your hair in no time flat. And then Snake Eyes talks, and he says, not flat, Colonel, splat, in a blaze of glory. That's where you're going. And then, oh no, the word balloon pointer ends on the barbed wire. Oh no, Dreamer Design, don't put the word balloon there. Okay. And then Snake Eyes keeps talking, but it's not Snake Eyes, it's Firefly. And I should have paid a little bit more attention. I got it a panel later. But I do think when you have a character all in black and another character all in black, and they're like wearing masks and they're creeping around the same building. Here are my 2 suggestions for how to differentiate them even more. And the fact that one of them talks isn't enough, because that could be a mistake. And I know that's disingenuous. So 1, make their costumes and colors even more distinct, right? Like, the 80s action figures, Snake Eyes is in black and Firefly is in gray. And in comics, coloring and inking, sometimes those 2 are the same thing, but like, no, you can differentiate these even more. 2, I would have on the previous page, Snake Eyes is always facing from left to right. When you turn the page, I would have Firefly always facing from the right to the left. I would just, you can't quite flop the page, maybe except for the first panel. But give me a like film directing comic book layout difference, in addition to like, he's wearing red gloves or, something like that.
And in Blaylock's sort of introduction in the Toy Fair issue, he has a bit of a preamble kind of interview. And one of the things he calls out about Reloaded being different is specifically about bringing the characters back to their kind of the originals and connecting them to the era we live in and the threats that shape it and shape us. Accordingly, Firefly will be returning to his saboteur roots to better serve a terrorist group like Cobra. So we are seeing Firefly doing a saboteur-y thing of sneaking about past barbed wire and installing this sort of explosive device.
He's not in his 1990s green and gray Ninja Force outfit.
That's for sure. Yeah. I wonder what they meant by that thing. Any hostiles entering her hospital room of record, well, they're going to get a big surprise. Do they mean that Doc is protecting her? Because we do get a guy entering her room on the next page, Snake Eyes, who then looks at her dog tags for some reason and then disappears. No, not really sure what this scene's all about. Any clues?
No, I'm leaning back on my previous knowledge of G.I. Joe, where these 2 characters love each other. I don't think they've met, but maybe they have. And so Snake Eyes is being protective. But, maybe in a later issue, Hawk or Duke is going to say something like, I sent Snake Eyes to do some extra recruiting. And, he made sure that O'Hara was safe. Or I'm okay if this doesn't get explained. This page that we're looking at, this wordless page, and except for her saying, hey, when she wakes up. And, hey, cool, everyone, a wordless page. 2 wordless pages with Snake Eyes. That's great. Mm-hmm. Him crawling up the building.
Maybe it's he's come to look after protect this person, Scarlet, but he doesn't know who she is yet, and he's seeing her for the first time, and he wants to learn who is this beautiful lady that has suddenly infatuated me, and so he's looking at her dog tags to find out who she is. Maybe
I'm okay. So if he's sneaking into this room, I feel like he's looking for her specifically. Mm-hmm. And then looking at the dog tags would be a confirmation that it's really her. Although maybe you would do that with the clipboard or the chart, on the wall or the side of the bed. This page is a big question mark for me, but not in a bad way. I feel like this is a mystery that this first issue can leave unexplained, that it will pick up later, because this series was going to, go on for a long time. And these character relationships were going to get expanded and mysteries revealed. So this isn't confusing, like bad. This is like, I want to know more. And then there's this element of, is he a ghost? No, but does he, he's a ninja, so he can just sort of vanish like that. And he was there just a moment ago. And then on the next page, she says, I thought someone was here. But to go back to your comment from the page before that, when the military guy says, any hostiles entering her hospital room Oh, any hostiles entering her hospital room of record. Well, they're going to get a big surprise. So is there a decoy? Is she not in the room that someone thinks she is because of the Zartan security breach back at the Pentagon? Or is this only a moment later and it hasn't been resolved? Is this like Zartan's disinformation working its way over?
Right, that may be, yeah, sure. She's on record somewhere on the system that she's in a particular place and they've moved her. Okay, so that maybe if Zartan did know where she was now, he wouldn't, perhaps. But then as she wakes up, we are introduced to Doc, but not the Doc that we remember, because it is a lady. Captain Carla W. Greer, who is helping to treat Scarlet.
So there is a trading card from the 30th anniversary or 30th salute set. Everyone remembers the Impel G.I. Joe trading cards from 1992, where there's a bunch of new artwork by guys who had drawn the comics of all the characters and all the vehicles, and then a bunch of cards that reprint covers for G.I. Joe and special missions. And those cards all have white borders. There was another set that was released in 1994 from Comic Images, which was this anniversary set. And it was like a history of G.I. Joe. And it was photos of toys. And there were a couple cards at the end of the set that showed some prototypes and concept art from Hasbro. And one of them, am I remembering this correctly? I'm not making this up, right? One of them is a Ron Rudat drawing of a black woman. Maybe it's just an early piece of concept art that showed up on Yo-Joe. Maybe it didn't make it to the trading card set. Anyway, there was this idea that, Ron Rudat, figure designer at Hasbro from 81 to, he was at Hasbro before the 80s, but on G.I. Joe from 81 to 86, he drew dozens of drawings for every toy that did get made, and he drew dozens or hundreds of drawings of figures that didn't get made. And so if you see one drawing that's got a different color scheme or of a figure that didn't get made, please don't think like they almost had a man with a dog face and claws for hands and rockets on his feet. It's like, no. That was one of many ideas, and they probably shut it down after like an hour. There was a Ron Rudat drawing of a black woman doctor, right? Am I making this up? Yes. Okay. Good. All right. So we can pick up from here, and you'll hold it up to the screen. So Ron Rudat drew this black female figure, and maybe she wasn't a medic, but no, she is, because she has a red cross on her shoulder.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Anyway, so this is, we think, a reference to that if you take the character of Doc, who was a G.I. Joe figure and who was on the cartoon and in the Marvel comic book, and you update them somehow for this new continuity, it's like, what are you going to change? It's like, well, they're a kid, or they're a robot, or they're like not a black guy. Like, oh, what if it's a black woman? Like, oh, well, there's this black woman in G.I. Joe who's never been a part of continuity, but there's this bit of artwork which got out there in that trading card set. And, like that piece of artwork that's reproduced in the trading card set sort of gains importance because that was in a trading card set. But like I said, Ron Rudat drew hundreds of things that didn't go any further, that, either some collectors have and know about, or none of us will ever know about because that stuff's gone. And so this is an Easter egg, or sort of a reference to like something that never was. And it's a way to add some diversity to G.I. Joe, because this new version of G.I. Joe has a higher percentage of women to men. So, but remind me, Doc's real name in the other continuity is Carl Greer?
I think so. I think it's Carl and Carla. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here she is Carla. Okay.
And
she's
actually
cool.
that male to female ratio was something that sort of struck me as we sort of finished out the book with that kind of lineup on page. We go towards
Where
the end.
Hawk says, "Are you joining the team, all of you?"
Yeah, that you've got a team of Scarlet, Doc, and Lady J, and on this particular panel, we've just got Duke, Stalker, and Beachhead. So, very balanced male to female.
Yeah. Okay, so so Scarlet says, "I'm in. People went after my family, and if I'm gonna join this team, I want this awesome doctor who saved my life in a badass way. She's in too." And then, here's an error detected. On this page that you've got on screen right now, this is page 27. In panel 3, Hawk's cup of water is being shot by Snake Eyes. And then on the bottom panel, Scarlet refers to it as coffee.
Uh-huh.
She says, "He may have terminated your coffee, but he just saved our lives." So explain this to me. They were gonna get in the Jeep, but there's a bomb under the Jeep. And because Snake Eyes shot the cup, they were going to get into the Jeep and really get away, but Scarlet ducked down thinking there was a sniper. And then
because she ducked, she saw a bomb.
She happened to look all the way under the Jeep and saw a bomb. I think if I was Snake Eyes, I like this. I don't want to be a jerk about this. I think this is a really good idea that's almost there. And I think it could be straightforward, a little more straightforward. If I was Snake Eyes, I might just keep shooting, shoot 3 more times and sort of herd them away from the Jeep. Although, I don't know, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe if you shoot any part of the Jeep, you've seen a million chase scenes in movies where they're like, get in the vehicle and get away. And the windshield gets shut out. And then the trunk gets shot and they're still in the Jeep.
If they shot the tires out so that they couldn't use the Jeep, I don't know.
But this is like a Hammer or a Humvee. Can you shoot the tires out?
I don't know. It looks like he's got kind of a Barrett style, heavy duty sniper here. So the end of it is like a weird glowing thing. So who knows? Then next up,
they get away and then
they get up.
Beachhead.
Master Chief Wayne R. Sneeden is recruited by Duke and he gives this sort of broken dagger as some sort of secret message from Hawk that he would recognize. And then they're reunited with Stalker and Lady J, who he has some sort of former connection with. And they explain that they were blinded by this Cobra laser.
And Stalker does have facial hair.
Right. Yeah, he does now. Yeah.
This scene, these 2 pages and a couple other pages in this comic remind me, jumping ahead 3 years, of the first 2 years of the Chuck Dixon G.I. Joe at IDW, where they're all in modern realistic gear. And so they all end up sort of looking the same, they've all got green and webbing and straps and pouches. And then someone's got night vision goggles, but it's not necessarily low light who's got night vision goggles. It's whoever's leading the mission because it's nighttime. And it's not realistic for Lady J to have a baseball cap. And I guess it's not realistic for Duke to have a mustard colored shirt. But man, when these, I like scenes in DC comics where, Clark Kent is in a jacket and tie and he meets Bruce Wayne. He's in a jacket and tie, and they're at some charity function and they do know each other because they've just had a Justice League mission together, or they don't know each other, or they kind of know each other and it's early and they don't trust each other. But what the colorists always do? Give them different colored suits. Bruce Wayne is in a dark suit or a blue suit, and Clark Kent is in a beige suit or something, because and certainly they got different body types, and one of them has glasses. And I look at this first panel here, and like, yes, Duke's got a black shirt. Yes, Beachhead does have his signature sort of ribbed sweatshirt. Lady J's got something different going on. Her sleeves are rolled up or cut off, and Stalker's a black guy, but you know, they haven't joined the team yet. They don't have their unique costumes, but I sure wish G.I. Joe characters almost always just had their, you know, references to their costumes, if not their actual costumes. You know, like, help me out and just remember they're toys. You know, like if Blowtorch is on a mission and he's undercover, that's one thing. But if he's just like at a restaurant, it doesn't make sense. I need to see him in his very hot, heavy, protective, flame retardant suit, because otherwise it's not him. It's just some guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in this comic, by the way, folks. That was a random example.
And then next up, we're in Cherokee County, North Carolina, and it's the Sons of Midnight or something. So it's like it's like a militia, and they've got a delivery of Cobra gear that they're now putting on, I think.
So they're already wearing blue coats, and they've got these armbands, but they're specifically putting on Cobra helmets and Cobra face masks, which, by the way, look ahead to the classified toy designs, where there's much more sort of detail and bits on. It's not just a black, like, cowboy, you know, face mask.
Bit of cloth. Yeah, it's
a bank robber in the Old West. I found this scene confusing because in the first panel, people are in silhouette, and in the second panel, Roadblock is colored like a black man, but because of the fire that's like lighting the scene, his complexion's pretty light. And then the guy who's neither Roadblock or Rock and Roll gets a lot of dialogue, which is fair because he's introducing sort of the concept. And then on the next page, Rock and Roll shows up, but you don't see his face on his first panel. The second panel, his collar covers his chin, and his third panel, the panel crops his chin out. So we never see his soul patch, his goatee. And, you know, I'm sorry if I keep hammering this home, but like the one thing that makes him look, I guess his hair is kind of spunky, but the main thing that makes him look like Rock and Roll, if he's not holding a certain weapon or wearing a certain uniform in this new version, is the hair on his chin. And Javier Salters, I think inadvertently, but goes sort of out his way to not show it on this page. And it's like, who is this? And I know he's identified in the story, but, you know, hold my hand.
Yeah, and I think I was sort of just skipping along a little bit quickly, and I didn't fully take in that last panel with all of that exposition where Rock and Roll and Roadblock meet and explain to each other kind of that they are both reporting into Hawk and that their code names are Rock and Roll and Roadblock. There's a lot of heavy lifting happening in those dialogue balloons that it's unusual for a comic just there be that much dialogue, and it's being between two characters, and it all just being a back and forth differentiated by a slightly different color treatment on the narration box. It's odd.
32. I think we're on page 32. Yeah, you make a good point. Yeah. There's this really nice drawing of someone in Roadblock pointing to a vehicle. There's a really nice drawing of someone, I don't think it's anyone we know, holding an awesome giant machine gun that Roadblock's looking at. Like, oh, fun. There's a good panel of two panels of, it turns out to be Rock and Roll over by the fire, and then a big panel of his face. Nice, really nice drawing of his face. And then these two panels on the bottom, I can't tell what we're supposed to be seeing in the first one. Is someone shooting a flare?
Maybe.
Mark just shrugged his shoulders.
Sorry.
It looks like a base that's got like a street light hanging out of it, or it's like it's that vehicle and the back of it is, oh, that device that's in the final panel is being tossed out in the second to last panel. Okay.
That's the back of this
Transport vehicle.
What they're calling a TAC, a transport vehicle. They're chucking out a deep
transponder. But I was confused because 2 pages earlier, back on the tarmac, when the 4 Joes all in green are talking, Lady J hands a laser to
looks very similar. Yeah,
Beachhead, and she says, "Oh, our soldiers got blinded when we let them walk into this laser, and it's this similarly sized small silver device." Now, granted, the Cobra laser has a Cobra logo on it, and here on page, I think it's 32, the deet device has a blue dot, a blue light on it. These 2 panels at the bottom, it's not just that the 6 captions of Roadblock and Rock and Roll talking back and forth to each other. It's not just that those 6 captions of dialogue are doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's that the 2 panels of art are doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I'm sorry, it's not clear.
Yeah. So this and because I skipped didn't quite digest these final kind of words on this page, I was reading a lot from Rock and Roll's face, and I was thinking, as a reader, we're meant to at least be given the impression that he has turned over to Cobra because his girlfriend is dead, and he's having this emotional turmoil, and that's perhaps turning him to the dark side. But I don't think that's the case at all, and I don't know if we're ever meant to think that. From this dialogue, it's, I guess, meant to be read in pretty quickly that they should be undercover. But there we go. So there's a satellite that picks up that signal back to the pit, which the pit is also introduced in this issue. But we don't necessarily know much about what the pit is. We're just in a room where they've got a giant screen and a map, and a lot of exposition. They've got Morse code giving an objective. They figure out that it's Silver Mountain, Mount Silver, and this is meant to be some sort of secretive, mythic base that has experimental weapons prototypes. And so they decide that they're going to mount up and do a mission with their new team.
So that's Hawk standing with his arms crossed next to Lady J, who's sitting at the computer. He's got glasses on, right? Sort of looks
then
like
on the next page.
Sort of
there's
looks
a guy
like
with very different looking glasses.
Yes, on the next page, it's Hawk who went to see the Matrix and was like, well, if Storm Shadow is going to start wearing awesome sunglasses, I am too. But is this the only time we see Hawk wearing glasses in this whole comic? This seems like nitpicking, but you've got so many characters and costume changes, and I really want the creative team and the editors to do everything they can to keep clear who's who and where's where. So
yeah, he wasn't wearing glasses in that earlier scene.
And if he's going to be wearing glasses here, and on the next page inside he's wearing sunglasses, maybe the color studio can make these sunglasses where he and Lady J are at the computer and they're both in green and also illuminated by green lights. And yes, according to we think it's Tim Seeley character sketch, his costume is going to have sunglasses. Also, he's going to be slimmer and stern. And then on the next page, where most of the team is lined up inside, and Hawk says, "Are you joining the team?" And they're like, "Yes, we're going to join the team." There's some copy and paste of panels where the 3 panels of them standing there, it's all the same art, and then 2 panels of the 6 of them, we're looking straight on at them, and they don't move. They do stay there. That's a copy and paste, and that's okay. And do you see what happens in the middle panel on this page?
Oh, there's
Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes.
Or
Right.
someone.
That's subtle. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the first panel at the top, and we are on page 40,
34.
34. The top panel. There's a word balloon, and it's sitting on Hawk's head and shoulder. I'm sorry. Wish that word balloon could just be a little smaller, move over a few pixels. Anyway, so he's talking to them. They're all standing at attention. Close up of him with glasses. Cuts to them, and they're all listening to him. And then we return to that first panel, and we were looking down from the ceiling. And now, in addition to looking down at the ceiling, we see from behind head and shoulders of someone all in shadow looking down at them. But it's got to be Snake Eyes because we see a little bit of the visor ear thing on his. And then in the final panel, that guy's gone. So Snake Eyes has infiltrated the pit and from above secretly observed this recruitment initiation where this squad of 6 people are giving up their civilian identities and their lives to join this best of the best team. And I will admit, on my read through in 2026, I don't know about my read through in 2004. I first missed Snake Eyes there when I read this before the show.
Yeah, so the Joes are being their service records are going to be updated to say that they've been dishonorably discharged or killed in action. They'll give up their names, their identities, and you will be G.I. Joe. And I think that's the first time that we're introduced to the phrase G.I. Joe in the pages of this book. And then they're given their code names: Scarlet, Duke, Doc, Stalker, Beachhead. I think he was called Beachhead already, and Lady J. And it's a little bit anticlimactic, a little bit playing it quiet. It feels like maybe that should be a bigger moment.
Do you mean like a half page or a full page, like a big bit of splashy art?
Yeah. And also we particularly because we get a transition from them in their somewhat muted outfits in this bit to as we then flick to the sort of action mission that they're now kind of in their more superhero-y G.I. Joe kind of togs.
Yeah, you never get a full. I think part of why we want a splashier moment where either they join the team, yes, we've joined G.I. Joe, or it's like, okay, now that you're geared up, get on the helicopter. It's not just because we want like the emotional release of like the cool big moment. It's also about clarity that they do change costumes, that they're in sort of, they're not geared up, and when you turn the page and they're on this mission in the helicopter, as you said, Beachhead does have his mask. Scarlet is wearing her actual Scarlet costume, but over the following 3 pages, you do see the costume. You never get a full good look at it. And I think that's a sort of representation of how crowded this issue is. That this issue really wanted like 8 more pages so that 2 scenes could be longer and a couple scenes could just have a little more breathing room. And again, I appreciate always how dense Devil's Due stories are in terms of dialogue and action and movement. And I don't just want like a splash page for the sake of a splash page. Like, show me the cool Joes and their cool costumes. But like their costumes are part of the fun.
Yeah, it feels like this last kind of mission bit is almost just a bit too much. You kind of getting to an actual conclusion for the issue, and then the mission itself just feels very condensed and confusing as a result of them trying to cram in an awful lot very quickly, and to the point of an awful lot going on and very quick. You've got Snake Eyes jumping off the back of the helicopter, having somehow snuck into the pit and then onto their transport, and as he's tailing the rear of the team, getting immediately into a sword fight with Storm Shadow, who is somehow there as they land at this point as well. And I think the Joes are none the wiser to this whole other kind of duel that's happening behind them.
So Okay, on the second to last page, we see Roadblock and Rock and Roll, and they've taken off their Cobra masks, and they're looking up. And Rock and Roll says, "No way," and they're on the left looking right, while the other Joes in the helicopter and having disembarked from the helicopter are on the right looking left. So I think they're all looking at the same thing. What are they looking at? What's happening on the final 2 pages?
It's a good point. I was lost. the G.I.JOE summary lets me know that the new terrorist group, Threat Cobra, or these militia who are now in Cobra gear, have arrived at this military base, Mount Silver, and they have made off with experimental weapons, including a new powerful weapon, Black Dragon 6. And I think this is that this is some sort of experimental craft, this giant droney looking
plane bomb
thing.
missile. Okay, so back on page back on page 40, 39, 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, when that satellite is picking up Roadblock and Rock and Roll's Morse code, and we're in the pit, and they're at the computer lit by green. This scene is a little hard for me because we do see Lady J and Hawk at a computer, and then we do see Lady J and behind her Scarlet and Doc, and then we do see I guess it's Beachhead and Stalker, but with no facial hair. I can't tell. And then someone, I think it's Hawk, looking at a computer screen map. And what I really need is a panel where I can see everyone. Some people are sitting, some people are standing, and they're all looking at the same computer screen. And I don't know. The storytelling could be clearer, and some of this is script, and some of this is art. I do think the storytelling. Anyway, so, and what they say here is, we're getting Morse code from your boys with the militia group, MT break AG stop. That must mean mountain, MT, and AG, lowercase, for lowercase that G, and on the periodic table, it's silver. Mount Silver. Might as well try mounting an assault on Elvis's spaceship. It's a myth, a bedtime story. And then Hawk says, or someone in silhouette says, no, it's experimental weapons. So we're going to go. Okay, so sometimes I feel bad when I co-host this show, because at the end of an issue, I'm like, I'm a little confused. And then I realize, we was all there. I just wasn't reading carefully. Because I think maybe listeners are aware that some panels I'm reading really carefully, like this eye has serifs. How dare you, right? It's word balloon, like the point at the end of the tail of this word balloon is touching the barbed wire. It's like, no, Tim, they're giving you the plot. It's like, we got to go to the base and stop the bad guys from stealing all the weapons. It's like they say it and they do it. How could you not see that?
But also I don't think we've been introduced to what this Armageddon in a box Black Dragon 6, maybe in the earlier sequence, if they had another little monitor that said, and this is what we think they're after, Black Dragon 6, this is this deadly device, blah blah blah, and just maybe get a bit of a context and set the the jeopardy up front. And I think we only know that these, is it the militia that's sort of taking the devices? All we've got to know that is happening is this one little panel of them seeing these helicopters with crates underneath, and all we know about the militia is that Rock and Roll and Roadblock sort of are embedded in with them, and they seem none the wiser as well. So it is a bit of a confusing sequence, because we're missing that thing of, here's Cobra capturing a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, the scene where Roadblock and Rock and Roll meet each other with the militia, or the page where Roadblock meets that other guy at the beginning of the militia scene. I think that needs a whole nother page. And I think we need to see them get there. I think we need to see someone go into the base, or someone at a door, like a big vault at this mountain, Mount Silver. It's like, the secret experimental weapons cache is on the other side of this door, or we just have to blow up the backside of this mountain and the experimental weapons are ours. And instead we get, on this page where the Joes are in the helicopter. This is that first page where the mission has started and they're in their costumes. And Beachhead says, we know these militia folks are approaching the objective by ground because you can't climb the mountain. And then Scarlet says, the 6 of us should be able to hold the installation entry point if Hawk's new boys break cover and give us some supporting fire. Okay. That is, that's clear if you're paying attention and maybe good at this. That does require like paying attention. And I do think the comic should meet us more than halfway. I think the comic is asking us to meet it more than halfway, because it's still visually indirect that Roadblock and Rock and Roll are undercover. Like, I don't know that I need a panel where they tear off their blue uniforms and they've got their G.I. Joe uniforms, or I don't know if there needs to be like a video screen, not just Morse code, where the Joes back at the pit, illuminated by a green computer, see Roadblock on a little screen. And he's like, they're heading to Mount Silver. Like, maybe I like the clever thing about Morse code and Mount Silver and AG. But this page that we're looking at right now, for example, right? The first panel, helicopter somewhere, and then 3 very well-drawn, sort of dense panels of Joes on the helicopter, in the helicopter talking, right? And then the next panel, a helicopter is flying towards a mountain that's on fire with some other helicopters. And then, is there a helicopter on fire up in the air? Or no, that's part of the mountain in the background, but it sort of looks like it's in the foreground. And then there's
another one that blows up.
Yeah, and I think Hawk or Duke piloting the helicopter, our helicopter, sees 2 helicopters and fires a missile and blows it up, and then like ropes come out of the bottom of the helicopter and the Joes rappel down. And if this some of this is definitely working. The Joes are on the left. These 2 pages, the Joes and the Joe helicopters on the left facing right, and the bad guy helicopters are on the right facing left. But they all kind of look the same in terms of helicopter design. They're all the same color. None of them have insignia. And just imagine, folks, if this was an episode of the cartoon from 84 or 85, it would be like dragonflies that are green and medium, and cobra fangs that are small and black and don't have a cockpit, don't have a glass thing. And it doesn't have to be this, but like, why can't those helicopters that the bad guys are flying, why can't they be blue like the militia, or red, just to make it clear? So if you read everything and you pay attention, it is all here. But this comic book needs 8 more pages. And then look at the final. I feel like something was compromised here. Someone ran out of time, or someone was thinking 42 pages or 48 pages and only got 40 pages, because this final page is visually a letdown. Because the first panel, I don't know quite what I'm looking at. I see like a weird thing, a weird device, like a robot or a totem pole, a tower coming up out of the woods. And I see a bunch of helicopters, and I don't know where they're going or what they're doing. And then I see 2 Joes, and then I see this, drone bomb missile doomsday thing. And then the final panel, I see Duke and Lady Jason silhouettes, and silhouettes are good, but sometimes they represent a time-saving device. You just ink the person all in black and you don't have to draw them. And on the bottom of the page, there's a bunch of like black negative space. And Javier Solteros can arrange the panels however he wants. He doesn't have to use every square inch of the paper. He can have some panels that overlap other panels. Panels can be slivers and rectangles and squares. But I look at this page and I think, no, that's not the final page. Like, surely I'm going to turn the page and there's like the final page. And it says to be continued in G.I. Joe Reloaded. And I thought, oh, they ran out of space. Some version of they ran out of space. So too much is happening. And I have a hard time following it.
Yeah, and to be continued in G.I. Joe Reloaded. We will pick up our Devil's Due content with a look at Reloaded before too very long, but sort of a confusing way to end the issue, and not necessarily an ending that makes you want to go, yes, need to read G.I. Joe Reloaded #1 to get into this more of this story, and a bit more like,
can I point out two things?
Maybe G.I. Joe Reloaded might make things a little bit clearer as we get into it.
This is a good point that for all the promotion and efforts of getting people onto a new G.I. Joe comic, I think the Cobra special does a good job of pulling you in and launching you into a new series. And this does not. This might scare people off. That's pretty strong. This might not entice people. On page 38, which is the third to last page, it's got 3 vertical panels. I just want to point out Javier Solters' penciling is really nice. I love all of his poses. I love his running, jumping, fight poses, them coming down from the helicopter. When he drew G.I. Joe later on at IDW, I was really excited, and I would love him to draw some G.I. Joe somehow again. So if I'm picking on the storytelling and the art, I think, when he's got enough space and time, he's a really good fit for it. Okay. This first panel where Beachhead says, why do I already feel like I'm being watched? Do you see up by the moon over the trees, there are like 10 like effect lines, and they're white. So, Andrew Pepoy inked them, these like little like dagger stabs, as if someone is like realizing something, or like, oh, some birds are about to like come out of that tree or something. I don't exactly know what those are. I think that's like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow in the tree, or a fight happening up there behind the tree. Mm-hmm. And my note is I drew those 3 lines. I drew 4 of those 10 lines, and I wrote doing a lot of heavy lift.
Yeah.
And I think you made a good point where this fight scene, this final fight, already is a lot's going on, and also it has Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. I also had one other error detected just while I'm pointing out little things in the lettering. Back on page 14.
Okay.
I'll just hold it up if you can't find it. Back on page 14. Oh, there we go. One more. Panel 5. Can you zoom in on that bottom left panel? So it won't ever let this go. Hawk comes in, and it's not Duke, it's Zartan, but let's say it's Duke. Hawk walks in and says, how's our candidates list looking, Hauser? Oh, there's supposed to be a comma there. And he says, how's our candidates list looking, Hauser? So, as I've said before in this show, direct address requires a comma, mark. That's all. I don't remember my impression of this comic when it came out, but I imagine that I was a little thrown off by the final pages, but still excited about issue 1 of the regular series. Still excited about the writer and the artist and that cover on the first issue of Reloaded, which we will talk about on a separate episode. Do you remember? I already asked you at the beginning, Mark, do you remember reading this at the time? Do you remember in general, like people you knew, or you were on the Devil's Due boards at the time? Do you remember anything of what people were saying either before or after these specials came out?
I don't know. I can't remember exactly, but I don't think people were necessarily particularly enthusiastic about it. I think there was a promise that wasn't maybe potentially delivered on as it got going. And I think, maybe people haven't necessarily set a firm judgment on this time, and there was a lot of probably knowing some of the characters involved, a lot of sort of concentrating on like changing of specialities and that kind of quite technical kind of getting into the detail of that kind of side of things rather than necessarily the complete art and storytelling at this point. But I think as it got into it, I don't think it necessarily really grabbed people's enthusiasm. I don't remember there being a big buzz as this got going and got further into the run. So probably much the same as I was giving it a fair shake, but not necessarily being massively gripped by this one, right. but not having given up hope yet by this point. So we'll get into it in a future episode, and we'll look at how things progressed with G.I. Joe Reloaded. Following up on that, if you're new to G.I. Joe, Talking Joe, you can find us at talkingjoe.co.uk. That is the website that links us to all of the places we can be found. If you are excited about Devil's Due specifically, we've got a whole bunch of episodes devoted to telling the definitive history and review and interviewing of people involved on that. On the YouTube channel, there is a Disavowed playlist that has got most of those episodes linked there. And people that will have seen this episode early will have been the Patreon members. They joined at patreon.com/talkingjoe. So big thanks to Richard, Sam, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig D, Shane V2. This one has a little soul patch. Infinite Entertainments, Patrick, Gary V, Coldroff, and B, who are getting early access to episode and some exclusive content. Where can people find you, Tim, when you're not talking to me about G.I. Joe?
Watch video essays on YouTube at Atomic Abe. I have a comic book store just outside of Boston. That's Hub Comics. And I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Very good. And I think that is us done for now. But before we go, Tim, is there anything you'd like to remind people of?
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.